What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a very special edition of Pro v Pro. We've got our winners of the free lessons giveaway to announce. We'll get into that pretty quickly. Also, the first signature event of the season at one of the best golf courses in the world, Pebble Beach. So lots to look forward to. How you doing, Justin?
Good, man. Yeah, I was just saying it's going to be a fun week for me because I played there, just over 6 weeks ago. So I kind of feel like I know it better than what I did before. And just what
was
to
that
look
your first
for.
time playing it?
Yeah, I'd never been there before. So we
Nice.
played Pebble and Spyglass, and they're both Spyglass is, I think, a better golf course, but
Yeah, I did too.
It's just not the mystique of Pebble Beach, right? So
I played both probably, back when I was in high school. So maybe 12 years ago, something like that at this point. Was a very different golfer at the time. So I remember being completely overwhelmed with some of the holes. But yeah, really awesome course. And of course, just when you go to Pebble Beach, it's just almost bound to happen. It almost feels like it should happen. We had horrible weather. So playing in like sideways rain, 30-mile-an-hour winds. I think I shot like 88 or something that day. But
I had the direct opposite. I had like 72 and barely any wind, and I was like, "This place is so easy, no problems." Greens were unbelievable. Like it was, we got really lucky for our Pebble day. I mean, the wind kind of died down as the day went on, and it was pretty awesome.
I saw that we might get some really extreme weather in this event on Sunday. I don't know how true that is. I haven't actually looked yet, but I just brought it up now. So it looks like Thursday, rain and some wind. Friday, rain. Saturday, rain. Sunday, yeah. Oh, man, look at this. So sustained winds up to 38 miles per hour, gusts up to 60. I'm thinking they wouldn't be on the golf course in that, but maybe if it comes down a little bit, we could get some really fun Sunday golf.
Dude, I love when you have a little bit of this, and I think it kind of changes a lot of the mindset for both betting and for DFS of you combine a no cut event with the weather, and what you got to look for somebody that might be a little bit better mentally, I think, than other times.
We'll get into course fit soon enough, and maybe we'll have to rerun the course fit model in past years when there's some weather. But before we do that, we've got to get to the giveaway. Two very exciting announcemements. We have the winners already. We can announce the lesson with me at Hamhawk41, and then the lesson with Justin at KHHart, both of those on Twitter. So you guys, I happen to know both of them. They're both FTN subscribers. So it's nice. We're not like in the dark, just waiting for someone to reach out to us to claim the win. We can reach out to them and get that set up. I'm not sure exactly when we'll be doing these lessons. It also will depend on these guys and their availability. But potentially, Justin, what we could do is if they're game for it, maybe we record the lessons and kind of post them. And, who else out there? There's bound to be someone else out there, I should say, that's, struggling with the same type of thing in the swing of the short game. So maybe it would be kind of a communal lesson using these guys as the example, something like that. So we'll see what they're game for, and then we'll figure it out in the after that. But some really exciting times coming ahead with those. That should be really, really fun. So excited to reach out to those guys and kind of figure out exactly what's next on the lesson plans. Justin, how did you feel about Torrey Pines and Pavon's win?
Well, I've said on Twitter, like I had when Morant withdrew, I went up to Thigala and down to Pavon and still didn't cash in the 200 single entry. So I guess the rest of my build was just that bad. But no, he went. I think that I saw something going in, and I kind of had already had my eye on him a little bit. But went a long time without winning, and now has won twice in the last 6 weeks. Sometimes when guys that are that talented just start to figure it out, you can kind of see something steamrolling here. Not only
part of that, by the way, part of that is why we've talked in the past about like this skill of knowing how to win, and it's why we say that we can definitively say when someone has the skill, like a Sam Burns or a Cam Smith, when they're winning way above the expected rate for how often they're in contention. But we can't say that somebody doesn't have that skill because, as you said with Pavon, like you can go from not winning a ton, but if you win once, you might have it all of a sudden. So we can say it only in that one direction, which is a really cool takeaway in golf.
Yeah, and sometimes it comes down to getting the correct breaks at the right time too. A shot when you're in contention that you kind of get a good bounce means a lot more than a one shot when you're way outside the cut line, right? They both come from the same luck of golf, but the timing of it, makes does matter, and it does change things. That being said, like, you give yourself enough chances, I think the people that are gonna win are gonna find a way to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So there were two big takeaways for me from this event. The first, I think, is just a really cool one, which is, man, I love difficult golf courses. I love it from a fan perspective, and I really love it from a betting perspective. I fired more live bets this past week than I do like typically in a full month. Didn't hit any of them. Came close on Zalatoris and 250 to 1 Zalatoris each way, which I fired early Saturday. But the reason why I did it, and we actually talked about this in the FTN Bets Discord, is that when you get on really difficult golf courses, the lead itself doesn't move a whole lot on the weekend. Like, what do you remember what the lead was going into Saturday?
I don't. I know. I'm pretty sure he shot 3 under the last day, and maybe he just shot 3 or 4 under on the weekend. I think he may have only shot like 1 under on Friday. I keep wanting to say Saturday, but on Friday, the third round. I think he played good on Sunday to win.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. Pavan was 3 under on Sunday, or 3 under on the weekend, including 3 under on Sunday. Shot even on Saturday. But the lead itself might have been 10 or 11 going into the weekend, and then it finishes at 13. Whereas if you get on a really easy golf course, the lead might be 14 going into Saturday, and it finishes at 27 or something like that. So guys who are far behind on difficult golf courses have a much, much, much easier path to getting back into contention, which is why I fired those live bets. I had a bunch of live bets at like 250 to 1 with the each ways, which basically were priced as if the lead was going to go to 20 and not stay right around that 12, 13 number. So didn't hit any of them, but at the same time, I think we saw exactly why they were positive expected value bets. So if we get on more difficult golf courses, the weather at Pebble gets pretty crazy this weekend, maybe we'll be firing some more of those. So
I think they also too, like, and this, competing at a high level is they tend to make the golf courses a little bit harder as well. Maybe firm up the greens a little bit when at places they can. They won't be out there mowing the rough on the weekend. That'll all be done pre-tournament, generally speaking. So, you get a little bit of that plus the pressure of winning and the situation, and you kind of add it all together. And that's why you get these harder golf courses where, a place like last week, PGA West, where you can hit it kind of all over and still make a birdie, right? The greens are soft and there's not much rough. You can't do that at Torrey. So.
Yeah, we also talked about that with Dunlop a couple of weeks ago, which was like on a golf course like that where there's just not a whole lot that you can mess up outside of the water. It makes it a little bit easier to stay in an attacking mentality, which I think we saw Jaeger really struggle with. I thought Jaeger got a little bit protective at times and kind of paid the price for it.
Yeah, I was still overly impressed by the way he played last week because his past, to me, has always seemed like he plays better in shootouts and not a harder golf course. So I think that, there's a lot of positives to take from what he did. The other thing is that people hear us talk about a bunch of high leverage shots. The easier golf courses, a couple of weeks ago, you had maybe 2 or 3 high leverage shots in the entire round. Whereas Torrey, you're hitting them almost every shot.
Every tee shot is a high leverage shot because a good tee shot puts you in position to score. A bad tee shot, you're begging to make par.
Yeah, so I think that's that's a really big deal for what we saw. And I will say that about Pebble, when we played it, it seemed pretty easy, but there are more high leverage shots than you kind of give it credit for on TV. Even like 8, it doesn't seem like there is, but how far you can push your golf ball down that fairway makes it much easier. It's pretty easy to hit a 3-wood and then you have 220 or whatever in.
Mhm.
But it, if you can get it all the way down to the end of the fairway, and then all of a sudden you've got 7 or 8, 9 iron, like you got a chance to make a birdie. So even the simpler shots are a little bit more high leverage than what I think that watching it on TV gives it credit for.
Yeah, I like that call. Last point on the last couple of events that we've seen, we get this incredible story in Nick Dunlap winning as an amateur, first time since 1991 when Phil Mickelson did it. Now we get Pavon, first Frenchman to win on the PGA Tour. Do you think that there's a case to be made that because Live Golf has taken so many quality players from the tour, that it's opened the door to have these like really cool stories? So for example, if Live hadn't existed, would there have been somebody in that American Express field that beats Dunlap, and instead of having the first amateur win, we're talking about how great he was to finish second or third, but now we don't really get to see him for the rest of the season. Same thing with Pavon. Maybe Pavon doesn't get the win. It's instead Taylor Gooch or Cameron Smith who got the win, something like that. So as bad as Live is in some ways, maybe it has created this avenue to get some really awesome stories.
I mean, to say that it doesn't matter would be asinine, right? Because the fact of the quality of golf that they've taken from the PGA Tour is so high. I mean, Hatton not playing this week is crazy. I really thought this would be a really good week for him, and to see him not play. I see Dunlap took our advice and went ahead and turned pro, as I said before the show. So I'm pretty sure what we said had nothing to do with that, but definitely the right call.
Imagine in an interview, he's like, I was actually leaning towards staying. Then I saw these two guys on a show, Pro v Pro, and you made a good case for it. So here I am.
But no, I think that all of this happening the PGA Tour has to be thinking about what did we do wrong, and we've backtracked. What do we do now? Because somebody had an interesting take, which I didn't think about, but not only have they stolen a lot of talent, they've stolen almost all the personalities. Yeah. So like all the personalities are now with Liv. There's not much, like who's the biggest personality now on the PGA Tour? Hovland, like just because of his, like you just lost all of that.
Probably like the Spieth JT crowd, I think. But I think Liv was very purposeful in that. I think they were trying to take the personalities. I think they were trying to going after Patrick Reed was very specific. You're taking the villain from the tour because people like to have a villain, something like that. So
Phil Mickelson, another one too. Phil Mickelson, they knew he would. I don't think they expected him to play high quality golf. Like I don't think that's why Phil Mickelson is over there. But they knew that his draw and his personality. Speaking of Phil, have you seen all the stuff he's doing with some of these young pros and just helping them? I saw he was working with Hayden Springer after Springer made the cut. And then, they obviously I've talked about him the last couple of weeks. He works with the same instructor I work with and stuff. And I saw I posted something of working on short game stuff with Phil Mickelson after the round on Saturday or Sunday, one or the other. So really cool of him to take time to go out. I saw, if you follow that Monday Q info on Twitter, he's good friends with Mark Baldwin. Baldwin went out and played with Phil. So he's doing something to get kind of give back, which I think is really cool. I think without our inside knowledge of golf, people probably on the outside don't realize how much he's doing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I saw the one with Mark Baldwin. Wasn't sure why, but if he's doing it with a number of guys, that's very cool. Maybe we gotta do some investigative reporting and figure out what the full story is there. Break it to the people. But let's jump into course fit for Pebble Beach. I have stopped writing the course fit articles on Mondays, in large part because we want people coming here to the show for course fit, which means we're going to get a little bit more into the details of the course fit model. By the way, we replaced the course fit model with an ownership review, a DFS ownership review. So something that I had been doing all NFL season. It was a pretty popular article, so we decided to do the same or a similar type of article for PGA. We will also, in that article for subscribers only, about once a month, we'll put some really detailed data in there on the type of plays that we should be using in DFS, like hit rates for chalk at different prices, different price ranges, I should say. So that's going to be really valuable data. We don't have enough data at this point in the season to draw some really strong conclusions yet, but certainly we will. For anyone who read the chalk report throughout the NFL season, it's going to be a very similar article to that. So very excited for that the rest of the year. But in terms of course fit, this is what we have for the week. We've got a slight emphasis on distance off the tee, a slight de-emphasis on accuracy off the tee, iron play slightly up compared to average, and then a very strong emphasis on both around the green play and putting this week. So a quick reminder, the way we're now presenting this data is any positive number means the metric is more predictive here than usual. Any negative number means it's a little bit less predictive. And the other way you can think about this is on an average week on tour, you would expect a one-stroke difference in any skill level. Let's call it driving distance. A one-stroke difference in skill is going to translate into a one-stroke difference in actual score on average on the golf course. Plus 23% for distance means the talent gap that ordinarily leads to a one-stroke difference here will lead to a 1.23 stroke difference. So it basically just says, hey, Pebble Beach separates the men from the boys. You can really separate from the rest of your competition if you are strongest in the fields or in the metrics this week that are the most predictive. So distance, around the green, and putting especially. And then I'm also going to throw approach play in there because we have gotten rid of Monterey Peninsula this week. It's just Spyglass and Pebble, and Monterey Peninsula was stealing some signal away from approach play. So now that we're concentrating on just these two golf courses and we get 3 Pebble Beach rounds, I think approach play comes to the forefront just a little bit more than it has in the past. Justin, how do these numbers compare to your initial impression of Pebble Beach, and why do you think we're seeing the spikes in the categories that we are?
I am a bit surprised by a couple of them. Obviously, the putting I understand, but with the greens, I think that being said, it's because the greens are just so small that basically if you hit it on the green, you feel like you've got a chance to make it a lot of times. So I think that's where that is, that's directed.
I think another one there for putting is that there are a lot of holes where you're unlikely to get a really, really short putt. It's more likely that you're going to end up in the 5 to 6 foot range or, a 15-foot birdie look. The putts that we've talked about previously, like they're the most stable aspects of putting where you're not really going to see many, 50-foot bombs go into the hole this week, where a lot of the time you do, which has a big giant change to strokes gained putting for the week, but there's no way to predict those. This week, the putts that are going to be made are putts that we can actually predict whether or not the guy's going to make.
100%. And that's the biggest deal. It's like, it's not so much luck, right? Mm-hmm. I know that sounds dumb, but I say it all the time with putting. Like you get to a certain point, no matter how good you are, like it becomes, if you make enough of them, it's just luck.
Yep.
I mean, that's what we talk about all the time with the Jordan Spieth factor, right? Of how many times he just seemed to make long putts at the right time that seemed to be luck, which directly opposite doesn't correlate at all with how good he's been at Pebble Beach.
Yeah, agree. So how about off the tee? Are you surprised to see distance kind of go to the forefront here?
Yeah, kind of, because of your high leverage shots of the par fives and stuff. I can see where it really matters. I think that's where the driving distance, because when I got done playing it, I was not like, oh, you have to be a bomber to play here. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of this also depends on the rough and how high the rough is, because there wasn't a whole lot of times I hit it in the rough and I was like, I can't hit this on the green. Right. So I can definitely see the difference of like, hey, hit it down there as far as you want because the rough isn't there. That being said, there's also a bunch of shots where you can only hit the tee shot so far, no matter what.
I think part of it too, and I was a little bit surprised, not necessarily because I was thinking about the course, but I know what the field, what the industry thinks about Pebble Beach, and that the industry doesn't believe that off the tee performance matters a ton here. So people certainly won't be flocking to bombers, for example. But I think that's more just a reflection of the type of fields that we've seen at this golf course the past few years, because it's been an unimportant pro-am. You're not getting the strongest players in the world, and which means you're not getting the longest players in the world, because distance is such a predictive part of golf that the best players in the world hit the ball further than the average PGA Tour player. So because we've seen some not very long players have success based on the fact that they're not playing against the best players, I think the impression that people have been left with is, you don't need distance to be successful here. And you don't. If you're strong on and around the greens, as the course fit model says, you can compete with anybody. You can absolutely compete with the bombers, but it's also very true that distance is an advantage here and something that you can take advantage of, especially if you're somebody who's not just long, but then also strong on and around the greens.
Yeah, and I'm pretty excited about this week, and I think most people know that I can't stand no-cut events. Like, I think it's dumb. Not a fan at all. But if you were going to pick a place in a golf course to see 3 rounds instead of 2 on the golf course, and the whole overall value of just the watching experience of this I don't mind them doing this here.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I think the AMs are only playing 2 rounds this year, and you're going to get more of the actual test of golf. They don't have to worry about setting it up so easy for the AMs and stuff like that. So I can get behind this week more so than most no-cut events.
There's also nothing worse from like a DFS perspective than sweating a guy in the cut line when you can't really follow his round at all, because there's no shot tracker on the golf course, and the feature groups are like showing one of his shots in the entire round or something like that. So in that situation too, or from that perspective, I also don't mind the no-cut events, even though I'm right there with you for the most part. We want to cut. Golfers want cuts. It's just a better product. So hopefully that gets fixed in the future. But in the meantime, let's go on to best bets. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised with my first 2 bets. Sahith Theegala, Keegan Bradley, both 70-1. Theegala is super interesting and worth further discussion, because we have Theegala, his fair price is like 26-1, and we're getting him 70-1 with an each way. So I want to go a little bit deeper into Theegala's game. The very first thing we'll say is notice just how perfectly Theegala's game matches up with this course fit model. He's long off the tee. He's inaccurate off the tee. He's pretty good with his irons, but that's not special. He's elite on and around the greens. So part of this is that Theegala, once again, is just a phenomenal fit for the golf course. But there's more to it, which is this. If you ask 10 different PGA analysts, 10 different successful PGA bettors, how they balance long-term form with recent form in their own PGA projections, you're probably going to get 10 different answers. But at least 9 of them are going to be some combination of, I use this amount of long-term form and this amount of recent form across the board. We do things a little bit differently at FTN, where we're treating each aspect of the game differently, where we're looking at a different balance between long-term form and recent form for putting as we are driving distance, for example, or different balance between long-term form, recent form for putting and approach play. And it turns out that there's a lot less weight to like the extremely recent form in putting as there is in off the tee performance. So let's just use that as an example. Now it's different throughout the bag, but that's the most severe difference. With putting, you have to go to like the last 44 rounds or something like that to get the most predictive recent form sample. Whereas off the tee, you can look at even the last 4 rounds. So Theegala hasn't had the best 2 weeks in his last 2 events. We all know this, but interestingly, where he's been bad has actually been on the greens, around the greens, things that we know long-term are going to be his strengths, where he has really done well lately, especially this past week at Torrey Pines. He had one of his best driving weeks almost of his career. He gained 1.18 strokes off the tee last week at a really difficult, challenging golf course, at one that we talked about. A lot of those tee shots are high leverage shots. So to see him succeeding in a way off the tee that we haven't previously. We know his strength on and around the greens is going to come back. I'm not worried about that at all. So even though he hasn't had the finishes we want, and it's a 2-week sample, like let's also remember he was second at the Century. So it's not like he's come out this entire season struggling. It's just the last 2 weeks. But the way in which he hasn't succeeded, oddly enough, is exactly what we want to see from his game to project him even better going forward than we were a few weeks ago. How do you feel about Theegala?
I mean, I think he's got the ability to have elite talent. I mean, obviously the course fits perfect for him, just everything you said. And I think like the common sense factor of putting is not as recent form. I mean, that, you know, you're putting on different greens, and the fact of the matter is sometimes you read certain greens better than you read other greens. You're just more comfortable at different spots. So the fact that he hasn't putted that great, it doesn't matter. Like you said, he hit so many good tee shots on high leverage shots that it definitely makes you think that he's going to contend sooner rather than later. And he played pretty good to even get inside the cut the second round. Like, I mean, he hit a lot of really, really good shots. And he made that, I think he chipped in maybe for eagle or hit it made eagle somewhere, and it kind of got him going. I wouldn't be surprised to see him contend. I do worry a little bit, just a high spin guy like that, if it ends up being as windy and as rainy as they say it's going to be, that you know, that's going to lead me a little bit other direction, just because he does play with so much speed and so much spin. It's going to be the same kind of idea for Keegan, right?
Yeah, I think so. I would maybe counter the weather point with, if we do get that kind of weather, that might just put short games and putting like even more at the forefront, because everyone's going to have to get up and down from difficult spots. So maybe that would actually help him. But I do agree with your point on the spin in the wind. The last thing I want to say there is just the overall point I want to make here with Theegala is, look, we're not just being stubborn by betting him again. And we're seeing value again. And then also, it's not that the model isn't reacting well enough to what he's done in the last couple of weeks. The model is reacting to what he's done in the last couple of weeks. It's just that it's a little bit counterintuitive. It's reacting in a positive way to his bad performances because of the way in which he's failed. So for anyone looking at that, like, man, why are they betting Theegala again? Hopefully you now understand that, look, I'm not just like, okay, betting him again. I'm really, really excited to do so.
Yeah. And I definitely don't blame you. I think it's going to click all at once, and we're going to see him contend in these elite fields a little bit more often.
So yes, similar argument for both Keegan and Straka. We're seeing plenty of value on both of them once again. And then the other two bets I have, I should mention Keegan 70-1, Straka 100-1, Cameron Davis 125-1, Lucas Glover 150-1. All of my bets this week are each way bets. I believe 3 of them are on Bet Rivers, so it's 1/5 of the payout for top 6, and then the others are Bet 365, which are 1/4 payout for 5 spots.
The Lucas Glover call is a very interesting one to me, because, when we build a lot of lineups this week, just to kind of switch into the DFS deal, the side of it is, as I build lineups, I feel like we talked a little bit about this as kind of a stars and scrubs type of week, right? So I think that getting Glover down there, you're going to get people that think so much about putting that I think it's going to drive his ownership down. He reminds me a lot of your bet last week on Zalatoris, right? If he goes out and hits it like he's capable of hitting it, he can contend here no matter how bad the weather is.
Yeah, Glover. So Glover's like one of the toughest guys to model, I think, on tour right now, because he had that incredible stretch towards the end of last season where he had 4 weeks gaining a ton of strokes putting. Those were like the only events that he did that. It's not like he built up to it throughout the season with better putting. He had 4 really strong weeks. There were even 2 bad putting weeks mixed in there. And then his putting went back to what we're accustomed to seeing, which is he's typically losing a little bit, sometimes losing a lot, sometimes gaining just a touch. So I don't know how to feel about his putting, but the thing that he did do consistently last year is ball strike the ball. He was excellent with his irons. He was quite good off the tee. And he did that again at the Century, where he lost a ton of strokes putting, but he was excellent ball striking, particularly with his irons. So from a ball striking standpoint, I don't think anybody that good tee to green should ever be 150 to 1. And that's kind of the thesis of this bet. And then if you do get any sort of spike from the putter, great. But from ball striking alone, I think he should be under 100 to 1.
And I was referring to perception more than actual right with the putter. Like his perception of the way that he putts is bad. I think when he switched to that broomstick, like he's using that what's that direct force or whatever it's called, the lab putter and the broomstick style. It really helped him. Like, I mean, he got it from Adam Scott and it really made a difference. So the perception and the reality, I don't think are the same.
And for the record, while making this bet, we have him projected to lose about a quarter of a stroke per round to this field with his putter. So the thesis of this bet is not, hey, we think there's a chance that he's actually a good putter now. No. He's popping in our model. We have him at 1.4% to win, which is about like 70 to 1 fair odds. And that's because of his ball striking and his volatility. Like the chance of him putting well basically just means that he's a high volatility player now, because his range of outcomes with the putter is a lot wider than we used to believe it to be. So that's why he's popping as value to win, not because we expect any type of good putting performance.
Yeah, no, I think once again, it kind of you hear all these other names, and I haven't heard his name come up much, and I can get behind. Like perfect example, like you said, he has the ability to go out there and out ball strike the field.
I'm guessing that you're pretty much behind the 125 to 1 Cam Davis bet as well.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's just a guy that if his talent aligns with playing good this week, he's not going to stay at that number forever. He's going to he'll live in the 30 to 50 to 1 range, I think, pretty much throughout his career once he breaks through.
Mm-hmm. We have him as the best projected player under $7,000 as well on the DFS side of things this week. I'm guessing he's going to be the chalkiest player under $7,000 as well, but it's a no cut event. So his ability to make birdies and eagles really comes to the forefront even more than usual. So I'm probably going to label him as good chalk, even though, typically under $7,000, maybe you don't want to eat too much chalk down there, but he might be an exception to that rule. Let's jump into the DFS side of things now, unless you do you have any outrights of your own?
I haven't no outrights as of now, and I haven't really dove into that much yet. I messed around a little bit with the DFS side of stuff and that kind of deal, but I haven't gotten into any outrights. And generally speaking, I don't play a ton unless just because I can't get the numbers that you have available. So it doesn't make much sense for me to play them. I'm not just going to give away some of my equity in these, in some of these bets. So it's probably a good thing that I don't have access to them because of the live betting feature of like, hey, like the same thing you did last week, where you just like, there's so much equity in these guys with the changing of the situation so fast in golf tournaments, especially at hard events. But I'll just be watching. That being said, I'll definitely bet the matchup against Cantlay, pretty much whoever it is. Like there probably isn't an odds that I will not play because it's going to be one of the top three, Hovland versus Cantlay, and it'll probably be pretty close to a pick 'em. So I haven't
So you're betting on Cantlay or against Cantlay?
Against Cantlay, and that's strictly because of what I saw last week. I mean, he hit it so bad, and he was hitting those left shots, and to even play as good as he did. I mean, I think he shot all 3 rounds over par after the first day, and even to score as good as he did was a miracle. I mean, he hit so many balls that should have gone in the hazard that just barely stayed up, and then he'd chip it to 2 feet or whatever. I mean, just there was a lot of fool's gold, I thought. Now, I know that being said, like he probably projects better. I know he's played good here. That's just the way that's the difference between you and I, right? Is the kind of the eye test of what I saw and knowing how he was getting away with shots that he didn't deserve to. I'm
so glad that you went to Cantlay in this way because number one, he kind of reinforces the point that we were making earlier about how we can take signal from like the last 4 events from driving in a way that we can't from putting. Cantlay had a bad miss left off the tee. It was his first event in a long, long time losing strokes with a driver. In fact, he lost about half a stroke per round with the driver. It was his first time since, holy cow, I got to go back into a different year. First time since the FedEx St. Jude Championship, August 14th of 2022, that he lost strokes off the tee. It was his worst driving performance since March 13th of 2022 at the Players Championship. That's how much he struggled off the tee last week. And to your point, like that's something we should care about. So from a DFS perspective, we get a really, really interesting situation at the top of the board. These strokes gain numbers, expected strokes gain numbers, are relative to this field. We've got Rory at plus 1.4, Scheffler plus 1.2, Hovland plus 1.1, Schauffele plus 1.35. Then there's a massive drop-off. There's nobody else even at 0.7 in this field. Ownership is not going to reflect that. So from a DFS perspective, I think this is a week where you want to consider heavily going all the way up to Rory or Scottie Scheffler, particularly if either of them ends up projecting for quite low ownership, which I think there's a chance that either one of those guys, Rory or Scheffler, because of just how much more expensive they are than everybody else, could slip through the cracks and end up being like 6-7% owned in single entry, something like that, which I would have a lot of interest in. But there's also a route that I might go both Hovland and Schauffele. Just say, hey, I get 2 of the 4 golfers who are head and shoulders above the rest of the field this week. And then, because it's a no-cut event, as you were talking about backstage, like that fact in and of itself already points us to stars and scrubs lineups. And now we get this massive difference between the best 4 and everybody else. So we might really want to lean into that this week.
Yeah. Right now, my initial build gets up to Hovland only because I've got some guys in the middle that I think, I mean, I like, I've talked about Fleetwood and Spieth and Day and with the weather and everything that's going in, that's where I stand right now. That being said, we'll see what happens.
And you were talking about Day in large part because he's going to be low owned, correct?
Yeah. Just because I think he's a good fit here. I think he's going to play good here, and I think that so many people are going to give up on him after last week.
I talked in the ownership report this week. So again, if you haven't checked that one out yet, I recommend doing so. But I talked a lot about Sahith Theegala and Keegan Bradley, and I mentioned them because they were 2 of the guys last week that we had projected for far more ownership than the industry thought that they would have. This week, my initial impression is that they're going to be quite low owned. And the point that I made with both of them is comparing their top 5 odds to their ownership. Last week, they were just pretty clearly bad plays. Now, there was a way to play them. There's always a way to play chalk. You can use chalky guys, particularly if they project well, like these guys did last week, by surrounding them with contrarian upside. As long as you do that, you can eat pretty much whatever chalk you want to. But this week, now all of a sudden, they're both going to have top 5 odds significantly higher than their projected ownership. I will be surprised at this point. Now, again, this could obviously change if ownership changes. I'll be very surprised if I don't have both Theegala and Keegan in my lineups. Again, I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. But the thing that I hope you guys realize is this isn't stubbornness. It's just that they project really well. I didn't use either of them in DFS last week in more than 1 out of my 3 lineups. So this week, they'll probably be core plays reacting to the change in ownership.
And when it comes to that, I'm going to be the one that's going to be doing something out of stubbornness, probably not you, just because of the difference in analytics and the way that you think about something. I'm the other side of that. Whereas if I were going to go back to somebody or do something like that, it's going to be because I'm stubborn. So just full transparency.
Speaking of stubbornness, one guy that I have been stubborn on in the past is Adam Scott. He's projecting quite well. Obviously hasn't played a ton. I believe his last event was in Japan in October, but finished last season really strong with excellent performances at the St. Jude. And that was I'm looking at the previous season. So he played in Dubai about a week ago. So he's actually played a decent amount through the late winter, early winter. and he's playing well. Like, I think if you look at his finishes, he's played the Euro Tour, so T5 at the Bermuda, followed by 6th at the Australian PGA, T4 at the Australian Open, and then 7th in Dubai. Those are a little misleading because the fields aren't as strong. He's basically been gaining around 1 to 1.5 strokes per round, which means he's in pretty good form and maybe better form than people realize. So assuming he's as low owned as we currently have him projected around 7%, how would you feel about Adam Scott? Because he's projecting quite well for us.
He's once again, he's going to come down to, he's got the ability to ball strike it around the golf course. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other of him this week. I don't have really a strong enough feeling to say, hey, I think you should do this with him. I couldn't tell you, like, if you're like, hey, I'm going to play him in DraftKings, there's no part of me that's like, hey, you shouldn't do that. But there's also not enough draw for me to want him to be in my lineup for sure. Now, I'm not saying that it can't build into it, but it didn't stick out to me.
That's fair. The thing I'll add about Scott is that he's a really strong course fit, much longer off the tee than I think a lot of people realize. Yeah, he's getting up there in age, but he's actually getting longer with his age. I'm not sure what kind of speed work he's doing, but whatever he's doing, it's working in terms of his distance. And then you think of Adam Scott and you think of this incredible, just beautiful, world-class, all-time classic golf swing. Well, he hasn't been that accurate off the tee, and he hasn't been that good with his irons. His strengths have actually been distance, around the green play, and putting. So a much better course fit than I think a lot of people will think of for Adam Scott based on what you think of with Scott is not necessarily actually his strength.
Yeah, no, he hits it really far. And the thing that I like about him, just as far as the golf goes, when it comes to ball striking, is he has the ability to hit it really high, but he also doesn't play within just a ton of spin. Like you think about some of the other guys, like a Finau type that just spins in an overwhelming amount. So, that side of it.
For the non-golf expert, can you elaborate a little bit on why you care so much about spin rate in the wind?
It just, your margin for error goes down so much with the more you spin it, right? So the more you spin it, whether this be side spin or just pure backspin, the higher rate that you spin it at, you get two problems. Your ball goes way shorter into the wind and way further downwind. So you have a big discrepancy of total distance and carry. And so therefore, like when it gets super windy and it's really difficult and you're already hitting at the small greens, your margin of error just goes down so much that I try to lean with guys. Now, there's a lot of guys that play really well that spin it a lot that don't hit it super high, which I'm a big fan of, like a guy that can hit a 4-iron that kind of appears as more of a bullet type, but it's still spinning a lot.
Yep. Yeah, and the thing I'll add to that is into the wind, downwind spin definitely makes it harder. But in a crosswind, a lot of spin will actually help the ball hold its line at times. So I think the other factor here is the ability to work the ball in both directions and to be able to flight the ball how you want. You need to be able to hit the ball high or low. And then if you have spin, if you have a lot of spin, like if you can shape the ball into the wind, so in a left to right wind hitting a slight draw, in a right to left wind hitting a cut, that will also help in the wind and counteract any spin issues. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing for Theegala, for example, because we know Theegala just wants to play the ball left to right predominantly. So if he gets into like a strong left to right wind that's also a little in his face, he doesn't really have an out for that. So I do agree on that forefront.
And that's why you see a lot of these guys hit three. You'll see a long into the wind par 4, and people are hitting 3-wood off the tee, and you get questioned. A lot of the people, especially that are big time left to right players, will carry a 3-wood that's a little bit more hook biased, and therefore they're just basically saying, hey, this is a really hard golf shot for me, and I have to do something to counteract it.
Yep. Yeah. There are a lot of guys who can't really move the ball right to left as a right-handed player with a driver, but they can with 3-wood. So you'll see that in certain wind conditions. You'll see that on holes that just call for a right to left shape. Scotty Scheffler is somebody who does that a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty common. That's just the way that the technology has gone with driver now, is that it's so different than it used to be, right? When I was a kid, you were taught you want to draw your driver and fade your irons. Mm-hmm. You see that pretty much has worked kind of the opposite direction now because of the technology. Yeah. The technology, you can spin your irons more and you can spin the driver left just through technology alone, not even the golf swing.
Yep. All right. Last thing, one and done. We didn't get the performance from Schauffele that we wanted. It looked like we were going to get that for a lot of the week. He just seemed like he was playing the golf course a little bit easier than everybody else, just wasn't making putts. And then, man, did that just explode on Sunday. He couldn't make a thing. So it feels like we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, but also we're just finally getting to the signature events. So get a win this week, all bets are off. You're at the top of the leaderboard anyway. Where are you thinking for one and done? Because admittedly, I kind of have no idea where we should go.
Let's start off with we're basically one Sunday from either Poston or Schauffele of having a couple of top 3 finishes. Yep. I like the way that both of them played at the time. It just didn't kind of go their way when we needed it to. So, like, looking back at that pick, I don't in any way regret the decision to use Schauffele on. I think he finished 9th, right, or something like that. So there's I still stand behind that decision and think we did the right thing.
I absolutely do too. But we got to get this week right, or at least kind of get things going in the right direction. Where are you thinking?
My initial thought with the weather and everything that I've looked into was Hovland. It's a good golf course for him. It's a guy that controls his flight. His chipping is drastically improved over the last 6 or 8 months. I know that we talked a little bit about the move from his instructor and understanding that. I'm not sure what's going on there as far as, because I think he's the one that really helped him chipping wise. That was my initial thought here, was Hovland. And then after seeing your numbers of the top 4 being so much higher than everybody else, that's kind of where I stand right now. Outside of that, I haven't really. I don't think I have anywhere else I've looked into. I mean, I can make a case for Spieth. I think would be another one that. I don't know where you're thinking.
I like both of these calls. I'll start with Hovland. I definitely like the concept of using one of the guys in the top 4. We can't use Schauffele, so it would be one of the top 3 in Rory, Scheffler, or Hovland. One of the reasons why I like that thought so much is because I don't think we're going to see this large of a divide between these top 4 and everybody else most weeks. I think part of this is course fit. I think it's also part of recent form. Like, Cantlay is eventually going to figure out the driver, and once he does, he's going to project a lot closer to these guys. I think both JT, Spieth, both of these guys, they haven't had the best form, especially Justin Thomas over the last year, but we're seeing much better play from JT of late. So a couple months from now, he might be projecting with the top guys in the world as well. You're going to get courses that are much, much, much better fits for Morikawa. That's less about around the green play, less about putting, more about iron play and accuracy off the tee. So he's going to have events where he projects a lot better. Spieth's ability to play in wind and Spieth's short game does make me think that he's a strong play here. The decreased weight on accuracy off the tee might help Spieth as well. So I like both of these calls. My only hesitation on Hovland is that I don't totally believe that he's become a great short game player yet, especially now that he fired that coach that helped him so much in that area. So I'm a little bit hesitant there, but I can also very much get on board because he might not even need the short game if he just completely dismantles everybody else from a ball striking perspective. So I like both of these calls. I don't even feel the need to add anybody else into the mix. I think I'm pretty good with either of these guys. The only other one that I would consider, I think, is Rory. Just saying, hey, he's the best in the world by our numbers now. He has far and away the highest win odds. We've got nobody else. So Sanders actually second at 7.9%. Rory is at 9.2%. 31% chance of a top 5 for Rory. And look, like the designated events have so much money in the purse that we're at the point now, there's no reason to save guys. Like this is the type of event that you want somebody. And I think there's just like going to be this behavior from most of the field that they do still want to quote unquote save guys a little bit. They don't want to just completely empty the chamber this early in the season. So I think if we went to Rory, there's a pretty good chance that he'd be contrarian. I think people also want to save him for like very specific events. Like they might want to use Rory at Bay Hill or something like that. They have an event circled for him, but they're not really going to do the same thing with Hovland.
Yeah. The argument that I have for Rory right now that I think is the fact that Scheffler's not in form. So I think it makes that gap from Rory down to the rest of the field even greater.
Yes.
So there's definitely that. I just don't know if I can get behind a guy that just sends it with the weather. If it was going to be a perfect conditioned week, I would be almost insistent on going to Rory. But with the weather conditions, I'm just, I'm not sure that I can. If that, I don't know. Does that make sense to you at all? Like I think that because he doesn't do much besides literally just send it. Like there's not much.
It makes sense to me conceptually, but I'll counter with this. Josh has some really awesome splits that he puts up at FTN each week. Credit to him. They're already up this week. And one of the splits is under windy conditions. Rory is actually number 1 in strokes gained with windy conditions, 2.65 strokes per round. Scheffler second at 2.63. Their baselines are almost identical as well, 2.53 for Rory, 2.52 for Scotty. So I think Rory might choose to just send it in the wind because he knows he hits the ball so purely that the wind is going to touch his ball a little bit less than it would others if he were to miss hit it a little bit. And so that allows him to send it a little more in the most. And then I would also say we have seen him flight irons quite well. Like if you remember when he won the Scottish Open last year, he did it with that absolutely gorgeous flighted, I think it was a 3-iron on the last. So he does have the shots in wind, even though off the tee, he just chooses to send it because he can.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I would say about the chipping with Hovland is you're not looking at a bunch of tight lies around the greens. It's more of, bunkers and thicker rough where, as I talk about all the time, it's more bunker shot type. You're not worried about chunking it so much. So you're going to get a lot more people that just chip it to 5 feet anyway, no matter what, how good of a chipper you are. Yep. So that's the only other argument of why I think Hovland stood out the most to me.
You made the same point on Keith Mitchell last year, and he did quite well here. And we basically were having like almost an identical conversation about his short game. So I think that's a very good point. We will figure out which of the 3, Spieth, Hovland, Rory. It sounds like we're a little bit more between Hovland and Rory than we are Spieth, but we'll figure that out in the rest of the week and talk about it in the FTN Daily Discord for anyone who wants to have further discussion on One and Done this week. I think that'll do it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Big congrats once again to our winners. We'll connect with you guys to figure out the lesson plan and all that. Let's have a fantastic week. We will catch you next time.